Okay, 4 p.m. on June 20th, 2023. I'll call to order the Burleigh County Human Service Zone Board meeting. And if we could take roll call.
Tracy Famous.
Here.
Jim Holm.
Here.
Senator Dever.
Here.
Leslie Piercy.
Here.
Trevor Vanett. Here. Galen Becker.
Here.
Commissioner Matthews.
Here.
And Chelsea Flory.
Here. First thing on the agenda, we'll do, or the next thing on the agenda, we'll do the approval of the meeting minutes from 4/18/2023.
I read through those and everything looks in order and I'd move approval.
And a second on
I'd
that?
second.
Oh,
I'll second.
Jim?
Yeah.
Okay. And we'll just do all in favor? Say
Aye.
any opposed? And then motion approved. The next thing would be, I asked to go over a confidentiality agreement. So this would have came out of, the board had been notified of a child fatality review panel result. So anytime that there is a fatality on an open case that we may have through child protection or a child who's in our custody, those go through the child fatality review panel like any other, and we just get results from those. So this board had been sent those results. That would have came out maybe a month ago. So based off of that, I did have some questions on as far as what information the board is being provided, what role of the board to review that information, because that panel provided us with feedback, which was essentially mainly around timeliness for safety planning and face-to-face, like those kind of improving practices. So just kind of, I was questioning what the board should be doing. So part of that was asking board members to complete a confidentiality agreement. You are protected under 50-25.1-11 as zone board members to get this information, but it just was a little shocking to me because it did disclose most of the information on the case. As far as how to address those when those are received, we do internal review of the case. Obviously, that fatality review panel reviewed the case. My recommendation would be that that case be reviewed with the vice chair, who I believe that's you, Becky, and just kind of, if there's anything from that review that should be brought to the zone board as far as improving practices or anything, that is kind of how we do it versus rather discussing the entire case. To me, it was just more like a need to know. And those cases are already reviewed by people who are deemed as experts in those areas. So I don't know if anybody has any discussion around that.
I didn't get the email a month ago. I'm sorry, I didn't see it, so
That's okay.
I just didn't get it. I think that's a good plan, because I don't think we as a zone board should be, we can get the information, but I don't think we can do much about it, so I think that's the plan.
And to follow up, the hard thing is when we review the case, I mean, there's attempts that are made in those cases that maybe aren't always looked at by that review panel. So when they're giving me feedback about like timeliness for face-to-face, if I go back and review that, I can indicate all the attempts that were made by the worker. I can read the supervision guidance that they're getting from their supervisor as far as next steps and action. So sometimes it just doesn't do it justice when you're just looking at that data point of the face-to-face technically was completed 4 days after, but you're missing all those attempts in between. So if everybody's in agreement with that, that's kind of how I've never seen one come. Obviously, I've only been here for a year. That was the first one I've seen, though. But if they come in the future, that's kind of how I think I would like to address them, if everybody's okay with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we haven't seen anything come through prior to that with names of family or child involved, so I was a little shocked to see that much information. I kind of would have preferred just saying, we have this case, if you wanted more information, reach out to your zone director, because that was a lot of information to have on a case that I don't feel that, in a HIPAA situation or in a FERPA situation that I really would need to have that much information. I'd rather have the end result of, there were questions about our timeliness on a fatality, and these are the correcting mechanisms we have put into place. That's more, as a zone board, what I want to know is what maybe steps were in question, and what do we have to back up, and if it was in question, what policies and procedures are we going to put so it doesn't happen again? I don't need to know the details of that specific case, I guess, is what I'm saying.
No, I agree. To me, it was just more like the board should be informed of like how we improve practices so that over the next year you can ensure accountability, or we're talking about
Right.
that, yep. So the confidentiality statement then that's in your packet, is just the one that we use for zone employees. There's nothing adjusted onto it, so it just basically goes over, that you have access to information, investigative reports, research data, in not any manner can you publish or disclose those to a third party. So I'm not gonna read you the whole thing, but it's a pretty, and then it does note North Dakota Century Code for that. So then you will just, it says employee signature, but obviously, you'll just sign off on that, and then we will have those. And again, they said you were protected under that part of the law, but I just wanted to make sure that we were covered, because that was a little shocking that you'd get that information.
I have one more question, I guess. Who sent the information? Was that somebody from the state, or who?
Mm-hmm, yeah. So that information came to us through like DHHS administration, who sits on that review panel. And I did immediately question, like, is this correct? And then was cited that, yes, zone board should be notified of this, so I did do my part to question it, but
Is the board required then to have how we did it this time, or are they okay with just the vice chair doing it?
no, good question, Trevor. In the letter, it just simply was a recommendation on behalf of that panel that the zone board look at those areas of timeliness as well as take time to review the case. So there was no expectation as far as like an action plan having to come from that. What are we going to do
Okay.
for, yeah, it was just simply to bring it to your attention, which was fine. I just thought, in the event that we wanted to do a deep dive on the case and do that review for accountability, I think it'd just be better if we had designated one instead of sitting down in like executive session and doing all parties, but I'm open to.
I would prefer not knowing that much information on a case. I mean, just
Yep.
just personally, I don't need to know names. I don't need to know all that. I just want to know, again, what steps were taken, how could we improve, and sometimes, unfortunately, there isn't anything because bad things happen.
Yep. Yeah. No, that sounds good then. So that's kind of how we'll do it in the future. If we receive those, I'll just connect with Becky or Commissioner Matthews as the vice chair, and then we'll just dissect it. And then I think that you would trust that if she had anything that she wanted to bring to this board as far as corrective actions we should take, she would do that, so. Okay. So if you want to complete these, I'll just grab them at the end from you, the confidentiality. I totally skipped number 4, which was the review of my evaluation, so I'm sorry.
You were skirting around that.
Just skirting around.
I don't know
that.
why, because did you want me to take that over, Chelsea, for you, since I worked with the state on it?
Yeah, I definitely, I don't want to.
Okay. I met with the state last week, Friday, by Teams and discussed where we're at. Chelsea got me her part of the evaluation early last week, and the state provided their comments, I provided my comments, and then the grading. You can see everything here, but I did also want that Lieutenant Luke Gardner from the Bismarck Police Department sent. My name is Lieutenant Luke Gardner with Bismarck Police Department. I'm currently the Director of Juvenile Services and supervise the school resource officers and Bismarck Police Youth Bureau youth workers. We work very closely with Burleigh County Human Service Zone and have forged a great collaborative relationship over the tenure of Miss Fleury leading the charge. It hasn't always been that way, but it is now. I wanted to let you know that we appreciate her leadership and collaboration. She's easy to work with and holds people accountable to include us if needed, but in a professional way. She's able to hear issues and look within her agency to see if there are ways to improve as well. I have had the pleasure of getting to know her during the time she has worked at the helm. of the zone, and she was a great hire. Thank you for hearing me out on this, and feel free to send it to the board. So I wanted to let the board know I got that email. And I think that pretty much echoes sometimes after meetings, conversations I've had with you, Tracy, about some of the collaborative work and some of the things that Chelsea noted in her performance review of joint trainings. Maybe you can fill us in a little bit more, Tracy, with the school.
My mic's not working, but we've found the relationship with the zone just to really grow since Chelsea's taken over. The level of collaboration has just been above and beyond. I mean, even when we have some complicated situations, which we do from time to time, Chelsea's been very giving of her time, and her staff have been very giving in doing case studies with us so that we learn from both sides. How can we work better together? And it's been looked at very positively from district level and then also at the school level. The joint trainings have been really good. We have shared needs in training, but also I think it's bringing us together and building and strengthening those relationships. So those are things that are very new over the last year, and it's been very well appreciated by Bismarck Public Schools.
Dick, I'd like to, Senator Dever, take a minute to hear. I've heard some comments from legislators, but what your feeling is on how Director Fleury did during legislative session, since this was her first one.
Well, I appreciated that Luke Gardner said she was a great hire, because I was on that committee that made that decision. So, no, I feel really good about what Chelsea's doing for the zone, and I'm serious. I think we have several really good zone directors, and I think we have some that have left themselves room for improvement, but Chelsea is right there at the top. And she did take an interest in the legislative process, and I saw her in the budget hearings on multiple occasions. And I appreciated that she was there, and had I had any questions of her, she would have been available for me to ask those. So I very much appreciate the job that she's doing.
Thank you. Leslie, you kind of are the foster parent here, which is our other team, and I sometimes, just because of the nature of the work, it can be difficult with the zone and the foster parents. I shouldn't say difficult, but there's challenging. Finding, yes, and it isn't always Chelsea. It's sometimes just the system. So how has that been going for you, having conversations with Chelsea or within the foster care community overall?
Yeah, I think, again, I'll echo the collaborate. There we go. I'll echo just the collaboration that we experience, the finding the right resources and the right people. It's definitely something that we're seeing, and even talking about joint trainings with the Foster Parent Association where we can collaborate and strengthen those relationships, which is something that has been a struggle for quite some time, just to rebuild some of those relationships with long-term foster parents. So I think it's been a really smooth and seamless transition. There's been other changes that I think have been very positive and helping to get the right information out to foster parents in a timely way. And yeah, I echo everybody's sentiments.
Jim, did you have anything? We already kind of had a little bit from law enforcement, but you work on the sheriff's side.
Absolutely. I know Luke Gardner very well, and I would echo what he has wrote on there, but also expound on that. And the fact that just working with Chelsea, we've worked actually closely and had several meetings, and even brought like our investigations section and several of her employees over, put them in the same room, and we actually round table and got to meet each other, and it was just very good. So I can't say enough. Thank you.
Thank
for
you.
what you do. It's appreciated.
Thank you.
So pretty much those are the sentiments that are in here, but I didn't want them all to come from me. I didn't want them all to come from the state. The state also has, I feel, because you worked at the state, you have a unique voice for the directors throughout the state, so you are not only helping child welfare service and eligibility services in our zone, but throughout the state, because you've worked with some of those people at the State Department. They trust and know you, and when you say, no, I've did all the steps that you say should fix this problem, and it's not being fixed, I need your help, and that they're seeing that in the other zones, that it is heard in a different way than maybe some previous zone directors saying the same thing. So I think you have a unique voice there. One area that you identified as a goal, and we did too, is that piece of finance. Because we have such a strong business manager, and I never want to discredit the work she does, because it's really helped you from the beginning, sometimes make mac and cheese when your team was short, to getting people hired on, to you were able to trust that that finance piece was taken care of, but getting more involved with that and understanding that more deeply as you continue. Any other feedback or any other input into this performance review?
The only thing I'd mention, I don't know if anybody else seen this, but on section value 2 collaboration, the actual manager rating is.
Yeah, I forgot to do that.
I thought you were gonna correct a spelling error on my,
Okay.
I remember
Jim,
from
you want to show me where?
my initial interview and Jim corrected me.
Thank you.
No, please don't.
I knew there was one missing, and to go through the computer and find that one is really hard for me right now, so I told Chelsea, I'm just gonna write it in, I have to sign it here anyway and hand it to them, so that's what I'm doing today. So do we need a motion to accept this, or is, okay. There's a motion, oh, sorry, Chelsea, so it's
No, no.
been in.
Nope, you're good. And do we get a second?
Second.
It's okay, she can say.
Okay. Leslie seconded it. Okay, so then all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And motion passed. Thank you all for all those kind things and for
Oh.
my, oh,
I forgot to put one thing in that I told Kristen I was going to do, so I'm gonna add it right now.
yeah,
I know how hard you work for the zone, and I want you to make sure you're finding a good work-life balance and not get burned out, because we need you here. So I know that there's weekends you're here, and I know sometimes as the director there are things, but we value you enough for you not to get burned out. And you set the example for many things for your staff, and that is also an example you set for your staff, is how you take care of yourself. So I meant to put that in here, but looking at you seems much more impactful right now.
no. I appreciate that. I definitely preach, like work-life balance, for my team to take a break. And I don't lead that example, but I tell them that example all the time, and I encourage them to do it. And so I actually just put annual leave on my calendar for July, and I think 3 of my management team responded and said, wow, good for you for taking a day off. So, yeah, I have plans, and this first year was just busy, but this next year I plan to use my leave. So thank you, though. And thank you just for all the nice things. I don't think I would have had as good of a year if it wasn't for my community partners. So thank you, Tracy, for everything with the school. Those are just good learning opportunities, and to bring my team together and promote collaboration. That was huge. Like you said, we share the same common interest, and we're serving these kids. So to come together was great. Obviously, my law enforcement partners are always great and helpful in answering any of my questions, no matter how strange they may have been. Everybody's very helpful. And for my foster parents, that is some of my comments for my next year, or I think things in my head for strategically, is really looking at, the state has talked about redesigning of adoption and foster care. And so that's a big thing for me, is kind of in the next year what that looks like, and how can I advocate for the people in our community. Also appreciate you pointing out that I help other zone directors, because I have a hard time when I know my zone needs my attention, but not sharing that information with those other zones, because I do recognize that some of them don't have that child welfare experience I have. So I try my hardest to offer all the tools and resources I'm creating, whether they want me in person, talking to one of them literally just said, can you give a pep talk to my team? And so I'm a pretty motivational person, so I was like, I can come out and do that for you, but, so, yeah, I try my best to help all, but remember that my team is my immediate need, so. Then Becky, you'll sign off on that, right? You did, okay.
It's right there.
Perfect. Okay, no changing your mind. Okay, so then the next thing is just director's report, so we'll just kind of go over the different units. I wanted to make sure I added that we'll do financial report after this, and so Tan will be able to talk about raises, comp equity, that kind of stuff. So I'll focus on more the programmatic part. So economic assistance, you guys got some of the data for that, and the statewide call center is the top graphic you'll see. I think it's huge that in March, we were averaging little under 10 minutes for a wait time on that call center. And then we went up into April to right around 12 minutes, but we have dropped all the way down to 2 or 3 minutes. So I think that that's huge to see we're making the improvements. This call center rolled out in February, so it's getting better. They've had turnover in the call center. Part of that was it's a statewide call center, so you had people who opted to work in the call center and then maybe changed their mind after they realized what that was going to look like. You had zones that maybe had positions that we didn't know quite where they were going to go on the redesign, and then it was determined they were going to go into the call center. So they have continued to work that, but the department has been really great in partnering with zone directors on hearing us talk about what our staff are feeling, the burnout they're feeling, what our constituents are feeling when they're calling in, and they have implemented kind of like a temporary tier. So they recruited another, I'm going to say, call center to come in and work on our call center and take those level 1 calls that are coming in. So things that they can field, they're fielding kind of like your basic information. And then if a call needs to be escalated to the next tier, that's when our zone staff across the state who are more trained in the eligibility are the ones taking those level of calls. So I think that's really helped push calls along. The biggest thing for the call center is just maintaining staffing. I'll just point out that you had Juneteenth where a lot of zones could have been closed. That wasn't so popular, but the next one would be the July 3rd. I think last time I counted 15 out of the 19 zones were going to be closed on July 3rd. So Commissioner Matthews, I don't know if that's a plan for, no. So that's the biggest thing, is because if those host counties choose to close and those zones are closed, then that really just puts the squeeze on those who still have to work, which would be Burleigh County. I mean, we're one of the ones.
So we talked about this when we meet about a week or two before this meeting, and July 3rd is going to be a very, very high volume day because it's the first Monday of the month, and that often people realize their benefits have dropped off or something has happened, and there's lots of calls to the call center. And if you only have 2 people in the call center and there's long wait of getting through and wait times, it can cause some very angry people to hear, and we don't really have extra compensation for that. So Chelsea, I really would like to look at bringing that forward at least for the Friday after Thanksgiving, because that's another one to the county commission board to see what our wishes would be and how to attack that.
Okay.
I have a question. Can't this board decide that is the zone? Though I thought in the legislation, the zone can decide all that, the county commission.
From my understanding, that goes through our county HR. And so then that would have to be a decision that is supported countywide, right? Which then impacts all your county departments. So we are county employed through Burleigh County, we have to follow their days off, their holidays, that kind of stuff. So there are host counties who recognized that they were going to shut down on the 3rd of July and then the day after Thanksgiving. We just aren't one of them.
That's correct. It would need to be the host county commission, so the Burleigh County Commission. Granted, they could look at considering that just for the zone, but that would be a difficult conversation, I think, to approach. But, I mean, that would be the option, is do it countywide or just specifically for the zone, but it would be the commission's decision.
I'm just really torn with it as a county commissioner because I'm just very torn. But also I know what position is putting some of our zone employees in. And so I'm struggling. I'll just admit, I don't want to make a decision for just zone employees that doesn't impact all of county, or that's the only reason it's driving all of county decisions, so.
And one thing that other zones were doing is, if their staff were to get July 3rd off, they could opt to work that day and they can choose a different day within that same week to take as that day, if that makes sense. And so they can have that flexibility within that holiday week. And so we are seeing that where some people are saying, yep, we don't want to be too short-staffed on the 3rd, so we'll choose to work that day and we'll take the 6th off or the 7th off. So again, you're seeing a lot of support from the Department of Health and Human Services for zones to really tackle this with our teams and come to a conclusion, so.
Chelsea, let's just stay in contact if this is something we want to move forward or not, but just to stay in contact, and I would love feedback from this board of where we go with that.
My recommendation, because I know what, as a client, from what I agree with Chelsea, you're gonna get a lot of calls on the 3rd because Social Security comes, and I don't think it's fair for our staff to have to deal with that. It's getting close to holiday, and I want to look at it from a county employee and a morale standpoint. I really feel that they're going to get inundated, and plus there's art in the park and all the other things in the community that are going on. The traffic's going to be crazy. I mean, everyone's going to be in Mandan. The rodeo starts on the 2nd. So I think for that one for sure, and the Friday after Thanksgiving, I'm strongly in support of the county commission giving those days off. Because again, you're going to have another holiday where it's the 4th week of the month, and you're going to have the same issue. The exact same problem. And I know some of the commissioners have issue with that, because I know I watched the commission meeting. But I think we need to watch out for our staff as well and make a recommendation to the county commission that we support our staff and what they recommend, because I don't want to lose staff because all of a sudden, they get yelled at because, they're getting too long a wait. And I don't think it should just be put in our staff. We need to look at what other zones are doing. And if other zones are doing this, why can't we for our staff? If I need to say it at a county commission meeting, I will, because that is how I feel.
No, I appreciate that support. I would echo Becky, though, that I think with the 3rd of July, with it being that beginning of the month, it's too soon to just say, hey, we're not going to do it. But I do agree that when when day after Thanksgiving comes around, to have conversations about it sooner and trying to get a pulse on what other counties are doing.
When's our next meeting after this? August, okay, then we would have time. I'm just, we're kind of living day by day right now. So that would give us time to have that discussion there and have our ducks in a row, and then we can approve or deny support from this table going forward to the county.
I think that would be a good plan, but I think I would encourage board members to show up at a county commission meeting. I know the quorum rules, but we can notice it. I think we need to stand up for the employees. That's how I feel. They get, with this new concept, Becky, they get shorted and have to do extra work that I don't think they should have to.
Chelsea and I had some of that discussion because the people that work the call center, because we've end eligibility, have been able to work from home.
Yep.
And some of the other zones can't. The multiple snow days this winter was an example of that
That's what I mean,
Yeah.
Becky, is they're forced to work. It seems like our staff's getting picked on to me, and I don't like that.
Yeah, I think their words are that they feel like they're punished for having flexibility or getting to work from home because they don't get those days, which is fine. They understand that they work from home, they're gonna work, but when they're some of the only ones left, it does put all that workload on them. So I agree with you. And those other zones are having discussions with their commissioner or commissions or their zone boards about the working from home. So I do know that when I came on here, that was kind of one of the concerns with allowing staff and tracking their workload and accountability, but especially in eligibility, all their work is very tracked. I mean, you can pull up dashboards and systems and see who's taking calls, how many calls they're taking. That's easy for us to look at performance. So I think that's the right decision for zones to make, but I'm not their director, so.
Senator Dever, how does the state handle this?
Madam Chair Trevor, I was just sitting here trying to remember. I think the state will be working on the 3rd of July. I think they work the day after Thanksgiving.
But I know Burgham's like putting in an executive order stating that they don't have to sometimes too.
I think that kind of an executive order would go beyond his authority.
Okay. I know he's done it in the past, especially on Christmas
Yeah.
when it falls. So I was just curious what they'll do. Because I understand other county departments have to work, why don't we? But I think we should have a little say too. I mean,
And I just think I focus more on not closing to support the clients, but then doing those other things to be flexible. So if people are gonna take a majority of that third off, I really appreciate when some of them say we'll work that day instead and we'll take a different day and flex it. Cause I don't wanna shut down an access for a client, especially at the beginning of the month, or make it any more difficult to receive services. So I really like it when those other zones are saying, yep, our commission is telling us we're closed this day, but we'll flex it through the week.
Well, and I think that's kind of why I'd like to see how this July 3rd goes,
Yep.
is the first mix of that, of the zones working together in the call center, and kind of keep it updated and have an update in August. So if we want to put that on the agenda for August, to kind of have an update of how that day went or how our staff was feeling, that would be appreciated.
Okay, I will do that. Only other thing regarding the call center would be, and this isn't so much just call center, but eligibility. We did have interest in our staff to do some mental health first aid training. So it's really just like a one-on-one on mental health. And some of them thought it'd be helpful as they actually do deal with a lot of callers who are in some desperate situations or feeling pretty hopeless as they're on the phone, and they can get some pretty serious threats from these callers on their state of welfare. So we are going to look at doing some mental health first aid training that call center and any eligibility staff can attend. And we'll also look at as well as like our front desk administrative and anybody else who wants to, but those are kind of the population that I'm looking at getting into that training.
sorry, but I hear a lot of the same things too, that, you know, some of the clients are having trouble. I've been hearing it from other nonprofits too, just so you know, Chelsea, they get the same thing. And I think our staff, I'm glad you're doing the training, because I think you need to report that when you hear that stuff. It's pretty, bad, And you don't want to have threats over the phone and all that, so.
No, and that's draining that adds to their burnout when you hear that all day from your constituents and they want to help and then they feel like they can't do it enough, so. As far as economic assistance, the rest is just, I don't want to say business as usual, but it is just continuing to adjust to the redesign. I think helping out other regions. So again, we operate within our region of Burleigh County, Dakota Central, Southwest, Rough Rider, and Three Rivers. But we also have been helping statewide. So the southeast area of the state, we've been doing a lot of their TANF cases for Cass County. So that's been nice where we've been able to identify, we have a strength within our region, which is primarily, you know, Burleigh County employee in that group, and they have offered to help out other areas of the state when they're in kind of like a backlog. So they've been able to help them get their cases back up, so. We intend to continue that support, not only with that region, but if another region were to reach out, we'll continue to do that, so. Again, I have a hard time staying within my lane, obviously, and I want to help anybody where we can, so. Any other questions for economic assistance?
I have a question. How is the, with public health emergency unwinding going? How is that?
The public health,
Public health emergency, the PHE
Oh,
was lifted, yep. And so that was due to COVID, that was lifted, which then just changed, oh my gosh, and if my supervisors were here, they'd say it way better than I can. It just changed the way they did the applications, from what I can think of as the Medicaid. Before, when that PHE was in place, it was just kind of like a standard recertification, but now they have to go through the whole process. And so it will add workload, and some of those workers in that lane, processing those applications have never practiced without that PHE in place. So it just was a learning curve, but I hear good. I mean, honestly, the biggest place we're seeing the burnout is the call center. And then everything else is really just ironing out systems that were already in place, and we changed the way, the process we're doing it, and those systems just aren't synced up to do the way we're doing them now. So they'll talk about things that are being pulled from, and they call it magnetized, but things that are being pulled from these systems and pulling them forward into the queue, assigning tasks. Like, those are kind of the things we're working out in all the programs, but really your squeeze you're feeling is in the call center. So I would just focus on that call time being down in May was a win statewide, so. Okay, next we'll go into the child welfare unit. This one, I think the biggest thing since we've met last time was just onboarding and filling positions. We were able to add positions. So I'll just jump when you look at the at vacant FTEs and like the percentages and stuff, you're seeing that for, trying to look at some of them, you know, back in January, we were 90% as far as filled, and then all the way to March, we're down to 81%, then we went to 84%. So a lot of that was we added position, and you were seeing movement within, internal movement, and then we had to fill their positions. So that has been probably the bulk of what we've been trying to staff, but we are doing really well, I guess I would say. One of the ones you'll notice on here is that human service aid. That one has been vacant, I'm pretty sure, my entire year. And that's a transporter position, which is very critical for the work we do, so that we have somebody who can do transports for parents and children, and that way case managers can be doing more of that higher level work. And so we finally filled that position, so that has been a relief. During some of this turnover, I was able to connect with our bordering zones and ask them for help. Specifically, would be a thank you to Three Rivers Human Service Zone. We share the same community. We're right across the river. So we were able to put a calendar together in Outlook that we could share with them, and we could put transports that we needed, and then their staff could go on and pick up those transports when they were available to. And that was huge for my team to have that relief, so.
Is that all the transporter does? The transportation then?
Yeah, I mean, it's transports and visits, so they'll do the transports and then they'll kind of supervise the visits. They'll take kiddos to therapy and maybe wait for them to be completed and come back, and then maybe give an update to the case manager. So yeah, it's they're providing the transportation, but they're doing some other good work while they're with the kids or the parents.
one thing I want to point out is you say you can't stay in your lane, but because of helping others with their backlog, such as Cass with TANF cases, means that we've had help in this area where we are struggling a little bit more with high numbers. So that give and take, I think, was the whole purpose of the zone redesign.
Yep.
And we're starting to see that those boundaries get a little bit more wavy so we can share services when we need to.
Very good point. I appreciate you pointing that out. Because sometimes we get questions on what was the point of becoming those zones, and that's exactly it. It was to break down the borders and do the just leveling the workload and doing the work where we needed to. So yes, thank you. So yeah, that's just kind of, the rest is just going over the numbers, as far as new cases. So in the month of May, Child Protection opened 69 new cases. I think we talked about that averaged, they held caseloads of average of 23 per worker at that time. And I think it's gonna be a while since I read that policy. I feel like it was like 15 to 18 is the standard caseload for those workers. So they are above average, but they are also above average workers, so they're doing a good job. They also have a 10th position that they've been approved for in the last few months that is posted, and we'll interview for. So again, that'll be nice when we go back into the fall session, because we know reports pick back up in the school year, so we'll be able to onboard and have another worker. They have 2 supervisors in that unit now, so that has been great to level their workload, promote them to take leave to prevent burnout, as well as giving more valuable supervision with a better ratio, so that's good. And for case management, we had 56 youth that we served through our in-home case management program, and 181 youth that we provide custodial care for in foster care. As far as trying to find how many average they do in a caseload, we've done a lot over the last couple months on doing more of a mixed bag of cases. So typically, historically, in-home did in-home, foster care to foster care, but we're seeing more of giving them a little bit of both. And that has been helpful to just trying to kind of do some cross-training, but also for continuity for these families. If a family's open in-home and they have an incident and the children come into protective care, then that same case manager can carry that case, so that family's not adjusting to a new worker. So that's been helpful. Any questions on any of that data? Anything you guys would like to see different in that data? Other things related to child welfare I would talk about is I do know that the department sent out a survey for foster parents. I'm gonna go way back to my first meeting. We've talked about, should we do a survey for foster parents? I did set myself a deadline by end of 2022, we do that, and we did not do that. But I was happy to hear that the department had sent out a survey for foster parents asking for that. And when I was contacted by various foster parents, it was, kind of this, I'm going to be really honest on my eval, Chelsea, and I encourage them, please do, so we can improve, not only for us, but some of these things are out of our control. It may be the way that the court system operates, or the way that payments operate through eligibility. So I did obviously encourage them to do that. So I'm hopeful that zones get to see results from those, whether it's specific to my zone or just an overall feedback. I don't know, Leslie, if you had any feedback on like when those were due or what kind of timeline you guys received.
I don't even remember right now.
Okay.
If I'm being honest.
No, that's okay. No, that's okay. So those did go out, so that kind of took care of that for us. So we'll talk about that probably at the upcoming meetings. Other thing we're doing in child welfare is we have a lot of agencies that want to give back to us. It always hits us at the Christmas time, but then we see it throughout the year. So we've been able to kind of come up with some fun concepts with agencies. Like they want to, if we have a need for diapers, they'll do like a baby shower for Burleigh. I don't know if I talked about this last meeting, but if we know we're in need of pajamas, we've had an agency put on like a pajama party and donate pajamas. So that's been great. So we're not just getting donations that we maybe don't need. And one thing we also did was create like an Amazon wish list for what we're seeing, and then we're able to share that with organizations that say, hey, we want to do an event this month, what do you guys need? We can just share them that wish list, and they're going to get us exactly what we would need. And then the next one coming up would be Evangel doing their giving day. So they have our wish list that they were able to share out, and they're also going to come in and kind of give back. And we were asked if we could be where they're going to give back to as part of their initiative. And so they're going to kind of come help us organize our donation room, our visitation area, just kind of give it a nice cleanup. So that'll be happening in July. Other thing would be just a reminder of the Haven Hills event we talked about last time. We had public comment on that. So that will be, Wednesday, July 12th. This is a free event. Gates open at 5. And so they'll have music, they'll have vendors, food trucks, games, and then they'll do the dunk tank. So you can catch me in the dunk tank. That's really all I had for child welfare. If anybody has any questions. Next on the agenda, it was just other zone updates. Really, the only other thing I didn't cover was that you guys, I made sure you guys got an updated org chart because we have had growth. So I just wanted to make sure you overall from both programs were able to, I don't know if this is in your packet. I think Tan emailed it to you. Yeah, I just wanted you to have an updated chart, what that looks like. So if you have questions when we're referencing capacity or teams, what that means, so.
Did you want to update them on what you brought to the county commission last night, just the change
Yes.
on that?
Yep. So we'll just move into the next agenda item, which was the fiscal update. And so I did bring something to the commission last night to get approved, but I'm going to let Tayon kind of talk about the whole part of that. Yeah.
Sure. And I'll just start with the packet information, just so we kind of go in order with that. So the first financial packet or information you have in your packet is just the regular monthly expenditures for May. So that would have been emailed to you earlier in the month. There's really nothing exciting with that, just the standard report there. So if you've got any questions on it, let me know. But the next section is our 2024 budget proposals. So that is actually split into two, just to give reference to kind of our different funds, different budgets that we account for. The top portion is the direct costs that we would have collaborated with the department on to build this. This was just kind of their summary, so that's what I provided you with. Timeline for this, this should be approved by the department by July 1st. That's what their timeline is. And then the bottom portion is our indirect costs, and there was committee meetings last night with Burleigh County, so this went to those committee meetings, and it'll continue through county commission approval, which should be finalized in September for that portion of it. But what happened with these budgets specifically, the changes out of legislative session, the majority actually of what used to be indirect costs or what used to be considered county responsibilities for our costs have actually shifted to our direct cost budget, essentially, so that it's strictly within our human service zone. It's strictly covered expense-wise, budgeted-wise, and reimbursed through the department fully. So that was a big benefit there with that. And then as Chelsea started talking about some of the other changes that did come through, the compensation equity study that was approved for equity adjustments essentially for staff for July 1 of this year. We don't know at this point in time yet what that's going to look like. There's of course a big process through that. OMB, the state has contracted with another entity to really kind of work out the formula, the mechanisms for how that's going to roll out, who that's going to apply to across the state for every department, not just zones. So we are anticipating that soon because July 1 is coming up really, really quick for us. But unfortunately, we don't have the details yet on who for our zone specifically that may impact or which positions or exactly how they'll be impacted. But it is coming, so we do have that information anyway. And then what Commissioner Matthews was talking about too, typically in years prior, our annual increases for salaries, they have been the legislatively approved increases, but we have implemented those January 1st, just because most zones, Burleigh included, operated on a January to December structure. But going forward, the state, the zone directors, I'm not quite sure what the conversations looked like, but decided it would be best if everybody kind of consolidated to the same date, similar to the state. So that's why we'll be moving to the July 1 effective date for any salary increases that are legislatively approved. So we'll be moving that date for us from January 1 to July 1 for our 2023 salary increases. And those, again, approved by the legislature, will be an average of 6% this year, performance-based, again. So again, there's different qualifiers, different kind of mechanisms that we have to look at when those are applied, and those come right from OMB. So we're still waiting on those as well to get put in place for any specifics come July 1.
Which I'll say, talking to payroll and HR, they want to be planful in order to know like what they need to do, but they did agree that they don't really need it much sooner than July 3rd anyways, because they can't start, they're going to have to manually go in and input it it's the middle of a pay time. So staff are going to make a certain amount for that first week, and then they're going to have to go and manually do it. So they said, really doesn't matter. They didn't need it much sooner anyways. I know we were kind of feeling like, couldn't we get it so they can start working on it, but there's not much they can do until then anyways. Yeah. I felt your sigh, so it's kind of like, yeah.
I was panicking
Yeah.
because HR is but I also know that moving to July with this takes off a lot of pressure they have at the end of the year for this, because the rest of the county and the rest of our heavy lift for HR as far as payroll is at the end of the year. So this change actually helps alleviate some of that end of the year, beginning of year pressure. So
Yep, it does.
moves it to a little bit different area.
Yep, and I mean, it's, I think part of the reason it's coming down to crunch time is because you've got the comp equity piece of it as well that really needs to be ironed out, and that's such a big project too. But typically in the past, it's been earlier than this that we have had the specific guidance. So I think going forward, I don't think we'll be quite as down to the wire as what we are now. Any questions on salary budget, anything?
Just that we did approve the preliminary budget for the indirect costs in our budget subcommittee that will be going at the end of July to full committee, and then we don't approve our final budget till September. But really, that portion is really our state's attorneys that serve in child welfare capacity moving into the state's attorney line items. Am I correct that the county is paying for?
Yep, that's correct. I can kind of elaborate on that a little bit too. Really, the only zone agency expenses that are staying in this indirect cost budget are items 2 and 4 there. Insurance and that's our portion of our auto insurance plan shared with the county, and then our building rental, our building lease. The remainder of those expenses are actually dedicated to the 2 state's attorney staff that we support. And really the only reason we chose to keep them in here is just to give the county, to keep giving them a way to track social services related expenses in one spot, because our indirect reimbursement is still going to go into this fund, so you'll be able to really best see what comes in, what goes out, as the mechanisms change for this reimbursement, because that is changing as well for the county, is how they're being reimbursed for these costs and what they're being reimbursed for.
Okay. Next on the agenda is public comment. There's no public to comment. And so then other business, the only last things I had were, coming out of session, there was a requirement that zone boards have a member of legislation on their zone board, which obviously we're very lucky to have Senator Dever, but that it'll be a requirement going on. So just to be known that in the event that you didn't want to serve on the board, we would have to unfortunately find a replacement, so. Yeah. Yeah, pick a good one. And then coming up would be reappointment for 3-year terms. And so the 2 people, I think, was Jim and Tracy, both November of 2023. So my plan is to just kind of touch base with you both. I don't want to put anybody on the spot right here. Touch base with you both and see if that's your intent. If your intent is to do that, then we would go before the commission for that reappointment and just asking them, can they be reappointed to my board? Because they're in charge of the appointment and the reappointment. So my plan is to touch base with you over the next couple months, Probably go to the September commission meeting with that information. In the event you choose not to, we have to go back to those applications, ones we previously had, or if we want to try to recruit anybody from the community to apply. If either of you had somebody that you would like to recommend, we can do that as well. Again, I can't guarantee who gets chosen, and then so September will go from the commission and hopefully finalize that, and then that way we're prepared for our meeting we'll have in October, where then we can reassign you for then November. If that makes sense. So, anything else anybody would like to add?
Yes.
Yeah.
A couple things. One, if you've been watching the county commission meetings, remodel of the Provident building is back on the table. I have not seen plans for that yet, but of course, and I'm not going to be very involved with that as far as only making sure my portfolio holders, which is the zone and HR, have the space they need. And I've talked about just with them about keeping the space we already have. So just to let you know that has been in discussion and where I'm at. And I'll keep you updated as things go. I will probably need to be out again the next 6 months off and on. So Tracy, are you willing to fill in as vice chair for me? And then I will have one of my commissioners letting Chelsea know who to follow up with if they need a chair position. I will need to be going back to Mayo next week, so I don't have a plan yet, but when I do, I'll let everyone know. So if you would fill in, usually Chelsea's really independent, so I really don't have to do much, but I always like to make sure there's a backup plan because I'm responsible and want to make sure if I can't do it, that there is someone, and I will make sure you have a commissioner to call. So.
Yep. It's a nice reason to do lunch. We can do lunch. Yeah.
So that's the only other business I had.
Anybody else? One thing I just wanted to ask the board as I go into my next year, obviously, again, thank you for this great first year, but if there's anything that you guys feel like are initiatives, things that I should be working on, things you think gaps we need to fill in the community, I want you to feel like your time on this board is worth your time and that you're being able to contribute to that. So you can feel free to, not like on the spot, have to say it here, but bring those things forward to me and I can make them a priority for the zone. If you feel like there's a training need, anything.
And the division on that, Senator Deborah Pam Sagnes would still be good on that stuff, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Maybe I could mention for the interest of the board, the human service related interim committees that are formed include the Human Service Committee, which I'm going to be serving on, the Healthcare Committee, Healthcare Services Committee, and then probably the big one that is not defined was included in the department budget to create a healthcare task force, which I will be sitting on, and the chair hasn't been determined yet for that. And that's going to be pretty wide open and have a lot of different stakeholders involved in it, including 6 legislators and the department and others. But that might be interesting for you to follow, and we'll see where it goes.
No, very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
I did enjoy session and getting to learn as much as I could, so.
Yeah. And just so you know, I appreciate your being there because I've always said that it is the role of legislators to have a small amount of information on a broad range of issues and then to rely on the experts to bring the expertise necessary to make decisions.
Yeah. It was good. You guys did good work. So thank you. Well, if there's nothing else, then meeting adjourned.